Seconds. Well, good morning, everybody. I am MJ Lace, and I'm live on Clubhouse. If you've not heard of Clubhouse, apparently there's an app to download now where you can see who's viewed you. I'll be honest with you, I'm not that interested in who's viewed me, so I'm not paying. But if you want to pay, you can pay for Clubhouse now. And Clubhouse is now a gated community, which means that in a little bit, you're going to be able to pay with crypto. I said it 3 years ago, maybe 5, and we're here already. The app is out. You can pay for Clubhouse. It's 50 quid, I think, or 59 quid. And if you go on a Sunday to Clubhouse, there is a town hall. If you don't go to the town hall on Clubhouse, maybe you should have a look for the Clubhouse town hall. And the app creators actually have a meeting every Sunday where they talk about Clubhouse. I believe that's still on. I've been an ambassador for Clubhouse for the last 5 years, and I was on this app with Pete Cohen, who is was GMTV's coach. Pete Cohen's my coach now, and it was a great funnel for people who were making money. If you don't know what a funnel is when you create a community, you get people interested in what you do, and then what do? Well, you feed them into your funnel. Or as my CEO said the other day, I'm just filling the funnel, MJ. I said, we don't need our funnel filling. It's full. Our funnel is full. I said to our CEO, we're really not interested. And I am the director and founder of Accessibility Partners. And the link's not up there, but I'll pop it in the chat. Yeah, good morning. My night was amazing, honestly, Jerry. Let me just pop this in here. So if you want in the UK access to work, which, by the way, I would never do on your own, and the reason I wouldn't do it is because the UK government are playing silly beggars. That's the only way that we can talk about it. Silly beggars in the UK. We've got over 500 clients. I remember when we had one 5 years ago. It was a lady referred to me through a colleague that I trained in psychotherapy with. So I'm MJ. I am a SENDCO, a specific educational needs and disability coordinator. My first degree is IT and computing. My second is a master's degree in education, online and distance education, which means you can learn all over the world without needing to be close to me, although people do tend to move to Wales. I'll be honest, I'm in Wales, Welsh Wales in the UK. My home is in Yorkshire, and I am in Welsh Wales. I moved here 5 years ago to become a social worker, which adds on to those confirmations of who and what and how I am. So my first degree, IT and computing. My second degree was in education. My master's degree in online and distance learning. A second master's in specific educational needs and disability coordination. A PGCE, which is a postgraduate certificate of education, i.e. I'm a qualified teacher for people over the age of 14. Originally, before my first degree, a nursery nurse. So I go from birth to death, learning, education, life and work. Now as a trainee social worker in Wales, unbelievably, the UK government are asking to put Britain back to work. Well, I'd love it if Great Britain was back to work, but the point is we're not Great Britain. We're not collaborative with it. We have different rules in Wales. different rules in Scotland, different rules in England, and different rules in Northern Ireland. So we might be Great Britain, but we are not integrated. So I moved to Wales to become a social worker. Why? Well, the Social Services and Wellbeing Act is an incredible act, and it's different to anything in England, as is the Future Generations Act, where we care about the people that are yet to be alive, i.e. our future generations. So I moved to Wales to be a trainee social worker 5 years ago, actually. I was on Clubhouse with Pete Cohen and James and Alexia, and I said I need to get cardiovascular fit and I need to be a voice for the voiceless. Who are the voiceless? Well, I think, to be honest, all of us right now, we're all voiceless, because the only narrative, the only voice that's in the arena is that of our politicians, and they are all vying for a super spot, a moment in time when they can tell themselves that they've succeeded, and we'll move on to what is success in a little while, or what I perceive as success. So welcome to Clubhouse. Welcome if you are online. Welcome to this recording, and this will be and will become a podcast. So I'm grateful for your energy, because, to be honest, I'm not very good on my own. It's why we're better together. We're better together because I'm a bit shit on my own. And we always say in inclUSion, which you'll see at the top there, the charity that's been running 17 years, it was branded Yell SOS, or Shout Help. Yell SOS, information, advice and guidance. And why did I start it? Well, I began it because I was a disabled person who couldn't earn more than £20 in the UK before my benefits were affected. And I realised that nobody else knew that they could earn 20 quid. And 17 years ago, that was a lot of money. Now, it's not gone up in 17 years, by the way. It's not gone up. Disabled people are still allowed to earn 17 quid before 17 English pounds before their benefit is affected, and they can earn that any day of the week. So I thought, actually, when I was on welfare benefits, 20 quid, 20 English pounds was a lot of money. And to top my income up, I could go and do car boot sales. I might want to be a window cleaner. I might want to help my colleague or my friend, my girl next door, to tidy her children's bedroom. I've done that too. I might want to cook a meal for somebody, and maybe I didn't want to be out of pocket, so I would ask for £20, which I was allowed as a disabled person. So the reason that Yell SOS arrived was because I could earn 20 English pounds, but also I could help people without being treated like a leper. I could help people apply for their personal independence payment. I could help them apply for the universal credit. It didn't exist then, by the way. It was incapacity benefit many, 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 many moons ago. An incapacity benefit had a time limit. So the UK government said, we're going to get rid of INCAP, and all the people on INCAP can stay on INCAP, but anyone applying for INCAP must do it by this date. So I thought, right, okay then. All the disabled people that come into my charity, and I opened eventually, I got myself, through this 20 quid a week, I got myself a space and a place at a local cafe. In fact, I used to go to the cafe and they said, we've got loads of people who are not coping. They're not coping. We're talking about 17 years ago now. I don't know what year that is. In the early noughties, maybe 2005, 2003, I don't know. I was already a specific educational needs and disability coordinator. I'd gone to university in 2001, the Open University actually, and got my first degree in IT and computing by distance learning. They call Open University the University of the Heirs of the Air. And actually, in the post-World War II, it was announced as the way to get people into university that didn't go to a Russell Group. You don't know what a Russell Group university is in the UK. a Russell Group university, or the 17, I think, or 15 or something, universities that were seen as elite, Cambridge, Oxbridge, eventually, and a number of others, Birmingham, Scotland, Edinburgh, and they were seen as the elite place to go and learn. Eventually, the university, the Open University of the Airs, opened, and people could learn by radio, audio, and eventually, of course, our wonderful internet, which we're doing now, right? We're on the internet. And the only reason we're speaking is because of the World Wide Web. And Tim Berners-Lee was an amazing chap. He created the internet because he wanted to communicate over the airwaves, over the radio waves, and he did that. And that moved on to many mainframe computers. In my first training in 1983, I was 12. And I'd already been playing and programming a ZX81. So if anyone knows the ZX81, you're very old. And so the ZX81 began being my playground, really. And it still is my playground, because now my playground is in artificial intelligence. So I played on a ZX81. Eventually, when I had my children, or my first child, I realised that in spite of not getting the traditional A levels, I'd gone to be a nursery nurse, remember? So I looked after little kids in nurseries and hospital wards and all of those difficult spaces when 0 to 7 children were challenged by either trauma or difficulty or loss of parents or illness or disability. So after my nursery nursing, I realised that teachers were paid far more than me, but I was doing a much more complicated job. Imagine in a hospital ward when you're dealing with children that are coming in with disabilities and their parents and their siblings. I just realised my job was bigger than I thought it was, and I didn't want to be paid silly money. So I went to look for university. My mother always said I should have gone to university, but I'm a person of determination. I'm disabled, so it was never expected. So at 21, I went to university. I became an Open University student, and over 6 years, I started to learn IT and computing. Good morning, Santos. Yeah, so IT and computing, my first degree. Open University was a mind-boggling experience for me, because when the assessor came round and knocked on my door, I burst into tears. I burst into tears because I'd lived a life of trauma. I had an alcoholic father and a non-engaged mum. She couldn't be engaged because my dad was an alcoholic. There was a lot of violence, an awful lot of discombobulation. And when I arrived outside as an adult, I'll be honest, I was not fit for purpose. So I learned online, and that knock on the door was one that sent me into floods of tears. When Steve Broadbent came into my house, and he was a gentleman who I respect and love and will do forever, I asked him if I had to get undressed. That was my first question to him. There's a reason for that, because I thought that all men everywhere always only wanted that. That was my experience. 21 years old, and I didn't know whether this medic, I thought he was a medic, it wasn't, would want to undress me, want to examine me, want to investigate what was going on. And he very gently said, no, I just need a conversation with you. I cried some more, because I didn't understand how he would give me anything without me giving him anything. Funnily enough, he didn't want anything except to meet me. And he said to me, you can't get on the internet easily. The point was I was ISDN, if anyone remembers the it's kind of clicking and If you don't know that noise, you don't know what I'm talking about. But I was on ISDN dial-up. It was called dial-up. And we would dial up the internet, and I would go and make a cup of coffee. And when I came back, I might get my homepage. Yeah, that's how long the internet took. But I was determined that we could communicate with each other around the world. I knew it was possible. Tim Berners-Lee showed me, and I wanted to lead the way or be part of the way. So Steve came into my house. We get over the fact I thought he wanted me to undress. And he said, no, I just want to know what your learning needs are. What are your barriers to education? Yeah. What are your barriers to education? He said. Well, I thought about that while he was with me. And I said, I'll be honest with you, Steve, I don't want anything else except I want to be able to reliably connect to my tutors and reliably connect to my other friends, the people that I was meeting online, the people who were posting in the chat forum, which was very, very basic back then. It was literally like somebody had typed to you and you could type back. And it maybe took 20 or 30 or 40 minutes before that message would get through. But when it did, and then somebody responded, well, it was like a miracle. It was like, what? You live where? And you're messaging me within an hour. You're not posting it. Remember, at that point, we were getting information from libraries. Don't know whether anybody remembers libraries or go to a library nowadays, but I used to live in libraries, both in the children's and the adult section. So the idea I could ask somebody a question and get an answer back within an hour without going to a library was like some sort of miracle. So I said to him, look, I need to be able to reliably connect to the University of the Air. And he said, yeah. And I said, look, all I need, I'm an IT and computing expert. All I need, Steve, is a little bit of RAM, which is random access memory. I had lots of ROM. I had lots of memory in the brain of my computer, but I couldn't actually connect via ISDN because in spite of the fact I had the first 1K computer. Anyone remembers that? We're talking about terabytes now. My computer was 1K. It was a miracle. You know, Curry's brought it out and nobody knew what the hell that meant, but we knew it meant the future. And I got a loan out. I bought a Curry's 1K computer for my studies. And I said to him, it's just not connecting reliably. Every time I go and make a coffee, I come back and I'm not on. And I've got to get access to my learning. I just want my learning. So I could download it and I could save it to my computer, but I couldn't interact with my tutor. I couldn't interact with my students, my fellow colleagues. It was just a ball ache. And he said to me, MJ, I can get you a new computer. And I was like, I'm sorry. I burst into tears again. I couldn't believe that a man was even here and that he didn't want anything, including, you know, nakedness or sex or violence from me. I'll be honest. I couldn't believe somebody was sitting opposite me saying they could get me a new computer. I said, but I don't need one. And he went, but that's how it works. So Steve Broadbent applied for my first disabled students allowance and got me a new computer. I feel a bit emotional. Bear with me.
Look where it's got you now, MJ. Just that progress is just meant. Biblical. Few profound words. It's the B word, biblical.
Indeed.
Bloody biblical.
Indeed. And
profoundly.
I think we've all experienced the knowledge that when something comes our way, we're not sure why. The universe has given it us. My first computer allowed me to complete my IT and computing degree. Interestingly, I never did my maths GCSE, I never did A-level maths, and I realised that if I wanted to complete the IT and computing degree, I needed the maths MU123. That was the course title. Might still be on the Open University. MU123, and I had to do it. So I was terrified. And our in Accessibility Partners, our head of client services in these days, we were best friends. Francesca, if you're a part of AP, you'll know Francesca. It's not possible not to. She's a Welsh dragon, and she's known as the Franweiler in her previous jobs. And she said she wasn't going to work for me for 25 years. Now we are 2 years in, and she'd never worked for anyone else. But I rang the Franweiler and I said, I've got to do this maths course. I'm literally noodled. I'm not going to be able to do it. I don't understand why maths is not my gig, but it's not. And in my assessment for my disabled students allowance, we worked out, I said the assessor worked out that I needed referring for an assessment for dyslexia, for dyscalculia, and at the time I was being diagnosed neurodivergent, as well as traumatized by my upbringing. Single parent family, very much poverty, difficulty with parenting, as it were. My father was a challenging chap who was alcoholic, and it wasn't easy. So I had to go for all of those assessments. I was also in psychotherapy at the time. I'd just come out of mental health hospital. My dad went under a bus when I was 17, and I turned his life support machine off 6 weeks later. So I'd come out of psychiatric hospital. I started university. I had my own family, and I didn't even know that I was dyscalculic, dyslexic, autistic, and traumatized. Nobody knew what trauma was in those days. I just knew I couldn't do it the same as everybody else because I wasn't treated the same as everybody else. So Steve came and said, I can get you a new computer, and I cried. Once I'd got over my tears, I said, how? And he said, well, it's called Disabled Students Allowance. And I'm like, right, that's why I've applied, but what do you mean you can get me a new computer? He said, well, if your barriers to education are that you can't connect, and the only way you can go to education is with the University of the Air, which clearly it is, you're physically disabled, MJ, but also there's other things that you're disabled by. One of them is your background. And the next is that you're a learning different human. And you really could do with some software to help you, assistive software. I'm like, I don't know what you mean. And he said, have you ever met a dragon? Well, I hadn't been to Wales back then, but I did know that there was some magic software out there called Dragon, which was speech to text. Now, I don't know what you do to learn or write or read or whatever, but I use my voice. Now, I'm an AI consultant. I've just completed my AI mastery, and I will graduate in just a few weeks. So I'm an AI expert, actually, I would say. We didn't even know what AI was maybe 5-10 years ago. I did. I was working in AI when mainframes started to talk to each other, and we had the first chatbot that the chap that made it, forget his name, he created the chatbot. His secretary came into the office and he said to her, I want you to test something for me. I'm going to leave the office. I'm going to leave. I'm going out. I want you to have a chat with this human, this being, not human, this being. And she started interacting with this chatbot. And when he came back in, she said, excuse me, I'm having a private conversation. Do you mind leaving? Because, you know, when AI began, it was literally a mirror reflection of who we were. We put in prompts, and if we said hello, it said hello. And if we said, how are you? It said polite niceness. And if we said, I'm looking for the Open University, it went and found the web link. So a chatbot was the first non-human interaction that we had many, many years ago. And I was working at that point. So I knew what AI was, the equivalent of a chatbot. way back when I did my IT and computing degree. And I also then went on to do a master's degree in online and distance education. And the reason for that is because it was the only way I could learn. And I knew there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people for whom that was true too. So that first computer that Steve Broadbent from Broadbent & Co. Managed to access for me through the Department for Education changed my life, and it changed a lot of other people's lives. MU123 was very difficult. I cried every Saturday. I would have to go to York. I lived in Scarborough, and I had to go to York and do a, a Saturday morning lecture. And the professor was somewhere in his 80s, I would imagine. And when I arrived, and he said, "I'd like to talk to you about velocity," I burst into tears. I sat through the lecture trying to work out how I worked out the speed of a ball bouncing against a wall and how quick it would come back to Sally or whatever the hell it was. And I literally, at the end, I just cried because I knew that I could not fathom what this very intelligent, articulate, capable person was talking about. And I went afterwards to him and I said, I just don't think I can do this. And he went, "No, you can. If you've got a GCSE, you can. You've got some maths computation, you can." And I said, "I don't think I can." And he went, just come back next week. Just come back. It will lock into place. And I contacted Fran and I said, "Haven't you got a cousin who's got a PhD in maths?" And she said, "I have." I said, "Well, will you do me a favour and ask her whether I can be helped by her? Maybe she could help me. I don't know. Maybe I could send her this question about velocity. Maybe she could talk to me about gradients. Maybe our map work next week she could explain how I work out the distance from here to there, and if it's a mountain, which it was, by the way, what that means and how do I calculate it." And she went, "Oh, I'm sure she will. She's great." Anyway, she contacted me, and on the side, kind of, because I didn't have study skills or mentoring back then. I just got my computer, remember? I only wanted some RAM when Steve came in. I didn't ask for anything. In fact, I didn't even know what to ask for. So I didn't ask for it. And he only gave me what I required. Or maybe he only gave me what he thought I required. Maybe he didn't even know what was available to me with an IT and computing expert. He ran a goods organization, really, and an assessment organization. So he had a connection. It's now called Barry Broadbent. Barry Bennett's. It's now called Barry Bennett's. But the truth is that Barry Bennett was a son-in-law, brother-in-law, I don't know, somebody, some relative, some distant relative of Steve Broadbent and Co. Steve Broadbent and Co. doesn't exist anymore because Capita have taken over. But he had an equipment provider who he trusted. So Barry Bennett became my equipment provider. So essentially, Steve came out to do my assessment, which he got paid for quite handsomely. And then Barry Bennett gave me a computer. That was pretty much it. And some Dragon software, which is speech to text. I knew nothing else about disabled students' allowance, but I realised when I was trying to get, I think it was Natasha, to help me with my understanding of maths, that I really needed some support. Not because I didn't know how to do my degree. I did. I was building programs. I was already building an online mentoring program. I was developing a website. My first website, quite frankly, was hysterical. But I knew, and I incorporated my first company during that period of learning as well. So I learned all sorts by looking at the World Wide Web, and I couldn't believe I had the world of library at my fingertips. I learned more in the first year than I'd learned in the first 21 years of my life, and I realised this was my gig. I got Natasha to help me with MU123, and I cried a lot every week with my professor, but somehow, some way, some which way, but how, I managed to pass. And by getting that maths component, I was able to go on and get my IT and computing degree, and then go on to a master's in online and distance learning, where we opened what were called MOOCs. They called them MOOCs, MOOC. Massive online open courses. I mean, come on, what a title. I'm going to open a massive online open course. Why open? Well, because many courses were held behind a paywall by then. People had worked out, and in fact, I worked with a chap, I won't name him, who created Orange. Do you remember Orange phones? The Orange contract phones, the first capacity to pay by your phone. And he was asked when he was developing that, how would anybody ever want to pay for something by their phone? I mean, what value is this? And he had to fight with the directors, would you believe, to create Orange's first pay by phone capability. And of course, everybody that developed on that made an absolute shit fuck ton of money, because it was a new way, and now it's the only way. In fact, I don't go out with my purse often, but if your phone runs out of charge, you can't go to your wallet and pay for your gig. Who would have thought that way back when, that anything that we were creating was going to create the world that we live in today? But of course it was, and it is, and it did. So massive online open courses were online open forums where people could learn stuff for free. Now that sounds silly now, because every piece of information is at our fingertips. In fact, in 1979, the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize was known to explain that no one human by 1979 would know the whole of the world information at all. 1979, remember, we're talking about me graduating or learning in 2001. Seems like a minute away, does 2001? And 1979, far, far, far away from where I was. But remember that in 1981, I was programming ZX81s. I was programming one of the first computers in BASIC. 79, we couldn't know everything. 81, I was programming. And 2001, I received the support from the Open University. You know, that degree is history now, just as my master's degree in online and distance learning and massive online open courses. But we created a MOOC, and in my master's degree, we created a MOOC that gave people an opportunity to do a reflective diary. Not only us, but my clients by then, who I was helping to get DSA. You see, I went to university for my master's, and I said, I'm going to create a company. And I want it to be called Shout Help or Yell SOS, a charity. And I also want to create a company called Learning Societies, because in 2001, there was a seminal paper called Learning Societies, and it told people that the landscape was going to change, and that capitalism couldn't continue forever, and that we had to learn how societies worked. This was back 24 years ago. It feels like yesterday. So I incorporated Learning Societies. I began Yell SOS, which is now inclUSion. And I went to university. I met with my PhD supervisor, and I said, look, this is what we're doing. And she went, that's too much. I said, too much for what? She said, too much for a master's degree. I said, well, it'll have to go into my PhD then, won't it? It'll have to, you know, it will continue. It's not about the learning, it's about the doing. So, you know, it will be what it will be, and it will take as long as it takes. And she went, it's too big. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean. It's too big for what? And she went, well, for anybody. Back then, the ideology of having a charity and a company was unheard of. Now, Scotland have now got this model where a for-profit organisation collaborates and feeds into a not-for-profit organisation. But until then, and until Scotland adopted it, it was a no-no. You know, we didn't have commercial with charity. Charity organisations lived on their own, with all the poor people and the broken people and the people that got funded by the government. And then corporate were a different lane, and never the twain shall meet. Well, I didn't think that was the case. Now, subsequently, in the UK, we've got CICs. Bit of a government quango, I've got to say, but a community interest company is when an organisation makes some community impact. We also have not-for-profit limited by guarantee, and that's what Yell SOS is, or inclUSion. So it's a limited company that is limited by guarantee. That means that nobody that's a shareholder i.e. a trustee, we all have one ticket each, gets any benefit from it fiscally. There's no financial recompense to the guarantors of a company limited by guarantee, and so it should be. So YellowSOS created, learning societies created, and I started to realize that as a master's degree graduate and a PGCE holder, a postgraduate certificate of education holder, working with post-14 children in college, I could start in business. I was asked by my first client to help their son, who had been excommunicated from every form of school that there was. Private school, public school, you name it, homeschool, tutors came, nobody could work with him. And his dad was doing I remember it was some level 3 in business, something or other. And while we were doing the course, he said to me, I've got a son at home. I don't know what to do with him. IBT3, there we are, Integrated Business Technology 3. Did the chat for his work. He was seconded by work, and he said, I don't know what to do with him, MJ. And I said, well, he probably just learns differently. And he went, will you come and see him? I said, yeah, of course I will. So he said, I want to pay you. I said, I can't. I work for this organisation. I'll come and see him anyway. Subsequently, anyway, that organisation got rid of their associate lecturers. I didn't lecture anymore when I came back from maternity with my second child. And I managed to contact him and say, look, are you still where you are? And he said, yes. So I went out to the house, and I didn't know it, but at the time I was definitely building the future. I asked the DWP how I could go to work. I knew I could earn that 20 quid. I knew I could step into work. I knew they wanted me to go to work, not just learn. And I asked them how they could help me. And that's the first time I heard about access to work. I told him that to get there and get back, it was going to cost me more than the £20 an hour I was going to charge him. And let's remember, I'd just got a college contract with Yorkshire Coast College, and they were paying me £27.50 an hour. So charging him 20 quid an hour, I was actually undercutting myself. But I knew he was a dad of a kid that was at home and struggling. And I said, 20 quid an hour, but I need to get my funds to get there and back. And I'm not sure whether I can get to your farm. I'm going to have to look at that. I didn't have a wheelchair accessible vehicle. At that point, my leg wasn't working. What happened was I went to drive the car to put my foot on the clutch, and I couldn't lift it off again. It was quite terrifying. I used to lift it off under my knee, and I didn't tell anybody for a while because I was frightened. But eventually it got to the point where my left leg wouldn't work at all. I couldn't lift it onto the clutch. I couldn't lift it off the clutch without putting my hand under my knee. I didn't want to talk about that. I'd been born with disabilities, 4 kidneys, lots of operations, but my body itself, my legs and arms, my able to move around the world was great. And at that point, I had 2 small children, and I didn't want to break. I was married to a man that didn't really deal with breaking, and it was terrifying. But it got to a point where I had to tell the DWP and the DVLA and the doctors that my left leg just wouldn't do what I wanted it to do, and I didn't understand why. I was subsequently diagnosed with all sorts of things. We don't need to go into that, but I don't feel anything from the waist down now subsequently, and my leg is probably only aesthetic. It's a beautiful thing, but it's got tattoos on it, but it doesn't really do what it says on the tin, i.e. help me be ambulant. So I moved through the world in a wheelchair. Little did I know when Steve came to the door that I would need disabled students allowance and access to work quite so much. I applied for access to work, and they helped me with a driver. I didn't have an automatic car. It was my own car, and I literally could no longer drive it. I employed somebody very close to me to drive me to this gentleman's house to work with his son. And his son got back into school within 6 months. He was a PowerPoint expert. He did animation on PowerPoint, maybe 250 slides, genius animation in PowerPoint. And I went to school and they said, what are you doing with him? Because you've got a genius on your hands. What are you playing at? And he went back into school and thrived because we communicated as a collaborative with the individuals that supported him, and I helped them understand why he just wasn't getting it and why school needed to be delivered in a different way so that he could communicate and articulate the knowledge that he had. He prepared for his biology, his chemistry, his physics, his maths, his English, all through PowerPoint. We used to take the learning points, put them on a slide, and then we'd create a slide presentation, and then he'd know them. And then when it came to the exam, he used additional needs software to express what he knew. He ended up getting amazing GCSEs, and I was charging £20 an hour. But Access to Work were helping me to get there and get back. It began a business that really has always been two-legged. I'd say in network marketing, you always have two legs to your business. It's interesting. You have a left and a right, and given that, my left leg failed first, let's go down that route. Yellow SOS was my first leg. I began a charity so I could help people to access the knowledge and information that I'd been given about DSA. Steve Broadbent was a god, and I love him and I respect him, and I'm grateful that his energy still exists in the universe. He was a man who began teaching children of the deaf children. He was a deaf children's communication aids assessor, and indeed I went on to do that course to assess deaf children's needs. An absolute god, he really was, and I miss him hugely. And the people that are assessing DSA today, contact associates, all of the people that work for them, not all of them, but many of them, used to work for Broadbent & Co. before the government closed all of our assessment services down. So I thank Steve and I honour Broadbent & Co. for being the people that opened the door to my education and meeting my needs. So I started teaching people about disabled students' allowance through the charity. And if they then became a student, I registered learning societies as a disabled students allowance provider. Study skills, mentoring, equipment, coordination, travel, you name it, so that people could go to university. Because I thought if people can learn, then eventually they can work, right? That's logical. If those people that haven't been able to go to university, first in their family, they call them, nobody else has ever been to university in the family, and they're the first. And I helped thousands of first in the family students. I didn't even know what that was then. It wasn't even labelled. But first in the family students who never believed they would ever go to university or ever believed they would graduate. But we made thousands of first in the families. And then we realised really quickly that people could graduate, brilliant, but would anybody give them a job? If they were quadriplegic, paraplegic, neurodivergent, dyslexic, dyspraxic, dyscalculic, have a mental health condition, the answer was no. So my master's degree in education after the online and distance education in specific educational needs really examined how we've learned societies. It really examined our unconscious and conscious bias. We live in our own cupboard. We don't know how it is to be in somebody else's shoes. And in fact, we make assumptions and presumptions based on our own experience. We have no fucking idea what's going on outside of it. So my first in the family students, they had no idea what university meant. Their mum and dad didn't go. They'd never experienced it. They didn't know what a lecture looked like. I mean, terrifying at the extreme. So our job in our mentoring and our study skills coordination was to help them understand how the hell an essay looked. They'd never had to do one. Help them understand what referencing was, which of course never had to do. But more than that, help them understand how the world of work and education worked and what a Russell Group University was and why people were elitist and the fact that they didn't want to look at the bottom because it might mean they went there one day. And they certainly didn't want the people at the bottom to climb to the middle because that would mean there was more competition. So from every which way and how, my students were prevented from being part of society. So when I developed learning societies, it was because my seminal paper was learning societies, how the hell we help societies understand that, well, inclusion is the only foregone conclusion, because everybody dies in the end and shuffles off and becomes dust. That's the truth. So wherever you think you've been born, because you've got a great mum and dad, or you're born into money, or you went to Cambridge or Oxbridge or whatever the hell you did, Oxford, whatever, it doesn't matter. Not important. Because later on, you'll be dying in a bed on your own. And at that point, you've got to just look at your life and say, am I anything except a human being or a human becoming? So I help the individuals that we supported through the charity into learning societies, and very quickly in 2015, not very quickly actually, about 10 years, wasn't it, even longer, I'd made lots of graduates. They usually did part-time, taking 6 years to do the degree. So people were coming out the degrees, a few got a job but not many, and I realized that actually nobody was employing them. Now, I'd become self-employed, hadn't I? I never asked anyone for a job. I was working at the University of Hull as a lecturer, associate, same as Yorkshire Coast College. I worked for CAB. I mean, I had a number of gigs, we call them now, but contracts that allowed me to work part-time. And I came off those welfare benefits, the means-tested ones, because I was earning too much, thankfully, at £27.50 an hour back in 2001. Ludicrous when the same teachers right now, by the way, are being paid £21 an hour for the same job, and it's 2025, 24 years later, and it's less of an hourly rate. I'll just let that sink. So my business was important. It helped people. It helped lift people up. The charity was important. It helped people out. When people came and their disabled students allowance didn't quite meet the grade and they couldn't get a printer, for example, printers came later though, we would help them through fundraising. We had people running marathons. Terry Franklin, who's on my podcast, go and look back at First Friday Live. Terry Franklin was the first runner for Yale SOS, which is now inclUSion. And he came to me having been an addict, been in hospital a number of times, heroin, drink, drugs, addiction. And he came and eventually, long story short, is now a psychotherapist working with children who have come from care. Wow. Right? Nobody wanted Terry. He was severely dyslexic. Nobody believed he could do a degree, and nobody wanted to take him on. And yet he's one of the greatest psychotherapists I will ever have the pleasure of working with. And you should go and look at that First Friday Live. We've got some powerful people on there. Powerful, powerful people. And Terry's one of them. So I guess what I'm alluding to at the very end of this hour, and I'm going to give 5 minutes to the people on the stage, is that when you begin something, you have no idea where you're going except for your intention. And my intention was to free disabled people. It was to free children who'd been abused. It was to free individuals who didn't understand that when the door went, it didn't mean they naturally had to get undressed and give of themselves just to get something. I was trained in transactions, but I was gifted people in my life who didn't want anything except to see my greater good occur. And that's why we have inclUSion today. It's why Accessibility Partners, which is in the chat, helps people go to work once they've graduated. It's the reason why our coping strategy support in 24 hours helps people get their welfare benefits review, helps them get what they need from Access to Work, helps them articulate to Access to Work what they want, and helps them access disabled students allowance. I'm still helping people in their DSA assessments now. I've got a young lady just doing law at Birkbeck. I've got a young man doing a master's degree in something or other. It's sexual health, I think. He's part of our Make Love Not Porn campaign, our Make Disabled Love Not Porn campaign, and is going to be teaching global consent in the Make Love Not Porn Academy. So creating a life that we deem is worth living, particularly for those people who weren't given it at the beginning, involves a practitioner, a group of people, a community around them that doesn't want to ask them to do anything that they shouldn't. And it comes from love. Steve Broadbent arrived in my house at 7 Highmore Way in Scarborough with love, with the love of seeing my capability and the potential that I had to be who I am. I'm now a trainee social worker for my sins in the last iteration of this degree. And I've never left university because nobody thought I'd go. So once I got there, I wouldn't leave. I think learning is key, but I also think on this Motivational Monday that being there for somebody else without expectation is an example of true grace. And I'm gonna honour Stephen Broadbent with this Motivational Monday. That if that man had not come into my life and told me that I didn't just need RAM, but I could get ROM. In fact, I could have a new computer, then I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't be helping hundreds of people through the Access to Work service, which, by the way, is being absolutely dismantled. I wouldn't be helping people through Disabled Students Allowance, which, by the way, has already been dismantled. I won't have anything to do with it. I won't provide anything for DSA because I won't pay people after 3 degrees less than, that £20 an hour. And in order to process that £21 an hour, I would have to do that, and I won't. The minimum I pay in Accessibility Partners is £15 an hour. That's more than the minimum wage, because way back when, what lifted me was being on £27.50 an hour, because I could only work a few hours because I was becoming increasingly and more increasingly disabled. So it's part of my moral integrity, part of my feed forward, that eventually everyone will catch up with £15 an hour, and then we'll raise it to 20, and we'll be back in 2001. So I'm the future, and I'm coming back from the past, and I'm here in the present to say it's still not fair, it's still not equitable, and it's still not cricket. And by the way, our lead partnership for Accessibility Partners is a blind worldwide cricketer who went to the World Cup for blind cricket twice, and he trained, I think it was Zambia, in blind cricket. So it's still not cricket, but I happen to have the world's blind leader of cricket leading our partnership team. And we have some great partnerships going on. And I've just been speaking at TUI, which is a travel agent. She used to be Thomas Cook. Don't we remember? Don't book it, Thomas Cook it. Well, I was at Thomas Cook or TUI just the other day in Luton, speaking to 150 travel agents about accessible travel. Who would believe that 25 years later, I'd be able to get on a plane and use a computer and potentially get on a bus and occasionally get on a train with lots and lots of support from Gemma, my personal assistant. So with a couple of minutes to go, I'm going to end this recording and I'm going to say goodbye to you all on Accessibility Partners. Look down there. I'm pointing to the web link. If you know someone who needs access to work, access to education, access to a life that they deem is worth living, then I would suggest that you send them to that link. We are working with inclusion, hand in hand, as we always have, to help people access the things that they need, the life that they want, and the opportunities that nobody ever gave them. I'm MJ Lace, and my sincerest apologies for my emotions, but the reality is that this has been the creation of a life that I've deemed worth living, as opposed to not staying around. And for you, if you have any fear about the fact that you are important, know this: you, no matter what you're doing, have no idea what you're laying down the steps for in the future, or the people and the places and the spaces that you will be creating. I love you all. If you don't think you're important, go to that link and we'll tell you how important you are. You can always contact me. My number's 07590 985 681. I'm MJ, and day or night, text me on WhatsApp and you'll be assured of a response very soon. Bye-bye. This has been an hour.